City Talks with Reuben Abati.
Hello, good afternoon, and welcome to another exciting edition of your number one talk show, City Talks with Reuben Abati, on your number one lifestyle station, City 1051 FM. On this show, we talk about stories of political and human interest that affect us as citizens of Nigeria and that affect us also as members of a global human community. Today, we'll be discussing population and sustainable development. And to guide us through this, we have a very special guest. And indeed, it is with great pleasure that I welcome to this program an economist and Chief Executive Officer of CFG Advisory, Tilewa Adebajo. Tilewa Adebajo is an entrepreneurial transaction business manager with 35 years experience gained in the corporate, public and academic sector. After a successful career in international finance markets with JP Morgan Chase, he ventured into the African markets with deep involvement in corporate banking, academics, policy, and financial advisory, project finance, and also consulting services. A former finance faculty head and lecturer at the Lagos Business School, Adebajo is a product of the University of Wisconsin, Madison, United States. If you want to be part of this conversation, you can call us on 0700-1051-1051. And you can also leave comments on our WhatsApp number 090-991-64403 and on social media accounts at City1051 on Zoom and Facebook. You're welcome to the program, Tilewa Adebajo. Thank you very much for joining us on City Talks with Reuben Abati.
Thank you, Dr. Abati. Good afternoon, and it's my pleasure to be on this program this afternoon.
Well, thank you very much indeed. Well, this week, just a few days ago, the federal government of Nigeria announced a revised population policy for the country to address the rapid growth, the expansion, of the population and the sharp increase in fertility rates in the country. And the government tried to establish a connection between this and sustainable development and also economic growth. Now, this is not the first time the Nigerian government has talked about population management. In 1988, we had a national population policy. In 2004, that population policy was revised. What is the necessity for this another revision? And what is the guarantee that it will work this time when it didn't work on two previous occasions?
Well, thank you very much, Reuben, for that introduction. And I think this is a very important topic because your population can either be an asset or a liability. When your population is an asset, which with most countries, you have a situation where the population, and which is made up of households, is very much involved in consumption. And with consumption, you increase what we call aggregate demand. So if you have a viable population that has purchasing power, then they are going to require so many things. Industry is going to thrive, the economy is going to thrive, and the population itself, with its spending power, can drive economic growth and prosperity, which is the model you see in most Western countries. And that is why you see when they're in a recession, they always try to get their households or their consumers to go out to spend to be able to boost the economy. Unfortunately for us, the Nigerian population has become a liability, and in the sense that our population is growing faster than our GDP. So throughout the era of this administration, over the last 6-7 years, we find out that the economy has been in recession twice, and even when the economy has been growing, it has not grown faster than the population rate of 3.5%. Consequently, we have thrown over 100 million Nigerians into poverty, and Nigeria is now the poverty capital of the world. So our population clearly now has become a liability And given the pressure that the government has in terms of fiscal responsibility, the government is spending 90% of their revenues to service debt. 56% of government spending is from borrowing, and our debt profile has become clearly unsustainable. So it is clear now that you have to begin to take a look at your population and begin to see how you can reduce that, because even key economic indicators are always on a per capita basis. So if you take a look at indicators like GDP per capita, Nigeria has a GDP of 400 billion, the largest in Africa. But if you take a look at the GDP per capita, we're not even in the top 10 in Africa, because at the end of the day, by the time you take our population and divide it by our GDP, our per capita ratios are quite poor. So clearly, I think it's now something that the government is focusing on, and I think it is about time. So that is the background of why population is very important from an economic perspective.
Okay. Nigeria is said to be the most populous country in Africa and the 7th globally. And, research indications point out that by the year 2030, 2050, our population would probably have doubled, with implications for, the economy and other development indices. But we say we want to reduce population. Isn't it a paradox that we don't even know how many we are? So what exactly are we reducing?
I think, Reuben, you hit the nail on the head there. Unfortunately, we have politicized our population census process, and because all our revenue allocation indicators are based on population, and a lot of people are not very happy with the population results, and we've lost confidence in that. But I mean, there are many ways you can tell basically what the population of Nigeria is. You look at things like the amount of mobile telephone penetration, unbanked populations are quite significant. So there are many issues there. So the census process has been politicized. And while the National Population Commission would tell you that they're ready to do a census, there's no political will to go ahead with the census because some people feel that it might not favor them. You have things like the National Identity Management Card System. Again, a lot of people do not have confidence in that system. You take a look at the voter register. Over the last 15 years, you have seen a situation whereby the voter register has shifted from the large populations from the southwest. Now you find out that the northwest is now the largest area within the last 10 years. So people are concerned about how this is being manipulated. And if you don't know your population, as you said, you can't plan. You don't know how many more schools you need to build. You don't know how many more universities. You don't know how many more hospitals. All the social infrastructure that a teeming population requires. You need to know the numbers so that you understand your demography and you can plan properly. So without those numbers, we cannot plan. And unfortunately, that is the bane and that is the problem of Nigeria today.
The President, in announcing this revised national population policy, also inaugurated a body called National Council on Population Management. He talked about Planned Parenthood, family planning. He talked about government promoting the use of contraceptives. Now, these measures, how far-reaching do you think they're likely to be in a country where previously, we all recall, that family planning became a major issue in some parts of the country? The use of contraceptives became a major issue. And people who have been commenting on this subject, they've been saying, look, will government insist on the abolition of polygamy? Because if the objective is to have just about 4 children per family, well, in many polygamous homes, some people have as many as 30, 40 children. And then, of course, in some parts of the country, the minimum age of marriage for females It's even below the age of 18, below the age of consent. How do you address that? And then, of course, there are so many issues. What measures do you think government can adopt to ensure the buy-in of the people into this proposal this time around?
Okay, like I said, orientation is very important, and also incentives. And at the end of the day, it's also important to understand that with education and enlightenment, a lot of people begin to see what is happening. And I think there's very interesting studies around that shows that the less children you have in the system, the higher your rates of deposits in your financial system and funds available for investments. So there's an economic impact. But in saying this, I think we should take a look at two models. Take a look at China and take a look at India. Those are two of the most populous countries in the world. And you see how China went about a very drastic one-child policy. It was drastic, it was draconian, but it has yielded results. And China today is an economic power. And they understood that their population, if went uncontrolled, could be a deterrent to economic growth. And what China has done today is that China has turned its population into an asset. For instance, China Telecom alone has 1 billion subscribers, mobile subscribers. That's China Telecom. And all the 4 telecom companies in China combined today have total subscribers of close to 1.8 billion subscribers. So you can begin to think about the economic impact of the sort of revenues that you are looking at from that subscriber base. Nigeria has only touching close to 95 million subscribers active. So if you can see what China has done, you can see that they have used a very draconian system. I don't think that can work here because of, as you said, the cultural issues. But also, let's take a look at what India has done. India has the same cultural problems as we do, and they have also been able to address that issue with contraceptives, with family planning, with orientation is very important, and more importantly, education and enlightenment. The more you educate people, the more people get enlightened, you find out that they understand the need to have smaller families. So I think it's important that not only do we set up these policies, but it's important that we are consistent with the policies. If we need to enact legislation to back those policies, let's do that. But we can borrow some from both the Chinese model and the Indian model, because you can now begin to see that both China and India today are now super economic models, and they have turned their population from being a liability into an asset, because you have a population that can generate aggregate demand and consumer spending to be able to spur economic growth.
Well, the example of China, the interesting thing about China was that between 1980 and 2016, China maintained a one-child policy. But China, in doing that, did not just stop at the level of the policy, what you refer to as draconian measures. This included very strict penalties, including forced abortions, including the sterilization of women, including the refusal to register, any child that exceeded the number. So in India also, in their bill, the population control bill of 2019, when Parliament discussed it, there were things like not allowing people who violate that particular law, piece of legislation, from voting, and prevented them also from having access to government jobs. Why do you think such measures cannot work here in Nigeria? To which, if you have more than 4 children beyond the policy, then is it possible to say, well, such women should be sterilized, or that people should not have access to government jobs, or women who have more than 4 children, should be made to abort the child? Will you recommend such measures for Nigeria?
Well, like I said, you understand that these are extreme measures that can be controversial sometimes. But at the end of the day, you need to you need to try enlighten. If you have people who don't have that enlightenment and don't have the level of education, then sometimes you need to take these sort of drastic measures. The Western countries are suffering from underpopulation, if you can see what I'm saying. Places like Canada have very, very strong immigration policies to bring high-skilled, educated workers into their country to be able to supplement their population because it's on the decline. Countries like Japan are actually suffering decline in their population growth. So you can see they have gone through an extreme and they are now suffering a decline. But at least they've been able to manage it. So we also have to look at what has happened in all these countries to be able to see what happens. Even in the West, birth control was very big. Contraception and availability for abortion, and people had those options, and people saw that and bought into it. Yes, in Nigeria, even if you say you're not going to register somebody to vote or is not going to get a government job, you know how we are in this country. Somebody will go back and go and register something, they will fix something, and before you know what's happening, the person has the job. So we don't have the systems to be able to control a lot of all these things because our institutions, our administrative institutions are very weak and lack capacity for verification and authentication. So we'll have to have some homegrown remedies, but which might include sterilization, as you've talked about, but it's important that it's not abused. And again, some politicians might be against it because in some parts of this country, underage voting and underage voter registration is very, very rampant. So you need to be very careful, and we need to look at it. There are religious issues around it, and of course, as there are traditional issues around it, as you've talked about polygamy. So we need to find a solution, and everybody needs to buy into the fact that we cannot continue to sustain this level of population growth.
Well, I understand the point about policy and sustainable development, capital formation, economic growth. How about the province of human rights? Under the Constitution, every citizen has the right of choice. You can make a choice as to your own, options in life. Don't you think we're likely to run into the, territory of human rights violations? Because these are issues also in those countries where population control policies have been introduced. And the second leg of it is a tendency to see population control as some kind of a Western conspiracy against low and middle income countries of the world.
Well, first of all, I don't believe in conspiracies, to be honest with you, Reuben. Let us understand what our situation is. We have a dire situation with our population as we speak. The underage children that are out of school, you've seen that problem. We have maybe, close to 15 million, 12 million children that are out of school, roaming the streets in this country. That's a significant social problem. We have 40% or 50% of our youth that are unemployed. And we do not have the capacity to provide. So if you start to have children and you have population that you cannot cater for, we are going to ferment crisis. Either they begin to go into drug abuse, Yahoo, go into Boko Haram, join ISWAP, and begin to engage in other antisocial activities that will eventually cause the security situation in this country as we've seen it today. There is a direct correlation between the poverty levels in the parts of the country where you have banditry and terrorism, outright terrorism. So we cannot run away from that, and we also need to address it. So it's important that we remove this issue of Western conspiracy there, and we ourselves should be able to define what our solutions should be. It's important to make this voluntary and to ensure that people have the incentives. If you have more than 3 children, then you understand that maybe the government is only going to take 2 of them in school. And if your third one, you have to go and put that one in a private school. Or you can only one of your children or 2 of them will register to be able to use the government hospital. Others, you have to use private hospital. So when people begin to see that they cannot access services, so if you have 1 children already in university, in a federal university or 2, you cannot have the third. you have to send the third one to a private university. So once you have those sort of incentives, I think people begin to understand it. Once you enlighten people that the route to prosperity, if you want to have a car, if you want to be able to live a decent life, you'll be able to, reduce the amount of children that you have. Because most of the people that have more children that they cannot afford to keep are poor people. Poor people tend to have more children. And I think it's a question of orienting them as to what we do and trying to put an incentive in place. And like I said, there are very many models that have worked in the world. So that's why it's important that we look around what has been happened in China, what has happened in India, what has happened in Japan, in the West, and let us begin to develop something that is homegrown, that will be acceptable to our population, instead of talking about Western conspiracies, because your population, we can't sustain it. Our GDP is not growing as fast as our population growth. So we're in decline. We have 100 million people in poverty. And as you've said, the population might double in another 10, 15 years. So if we do not have that, then we'll have a crisis on our hands at that point in time if we continue to go at this rate. So we need to address it and take this quite seriously.
Well, the revised national population policy is to be managed by the National Council on Population Management. That National Council is to be chaired by the President, with the Vice President as Vice Chairman, and then ministers in the various ministries as members. But don't you think that there is the problem of time? We're entering election season, and the Buhari administration is introducing this revised population policy as it prepares to wind down. So is there any time at all to even give effect to that policy? And then secondly, do Nigerian leaders even have the moral right to dictate family planning to Nigerians, considering the fact that many of our leaders, some of them have like 8 wives, 30 children. Some of them have children in virtually every capital of Nigeria, or every state of Nigeria. And we have this problem of trust. So you said poor people tend to breed a lot, but they're likely to say, well, I know so minister who has 40 children. So why would that minister be a member of a committee that is telling me I can't have more than 4 children? So do we have here a problem of leadership by example?
Yes, without a doubt. Those are significant issues that you have raised in terms of, you have to lead by example, and leadership in this country. If the leadership elite or the politicians and the elected officials are leading by example, then it's easier for you to implement the policy. You can see what's going on with the British Prime Minister now. Talking about severe lockdowns, and they were having parties at 10 Downing Street, and when everybody else was under lockdown. It's likely going to cost him his job because, at that level and with that sort of severe measures you are putting on the country, as the Prime Minister, you want to be seen to be leading by example. So these are the moral issues. But in Nigeria, we still have that issue that it is one rule for you and one rule for us. And our political leadership has not yet imbibed this sort of culture. There's still an arrogance that comes with power. Our political leaders and elected officials behave like neo-colonialists, and believe in entitlement is their resources to grab. So they don't have that moral leadership that you can say will convince a lot of people to do what they're supposed to do. And this is where you have the unique problem in Nigeria. So that is the whole essence of what we're saying. And that is the big problem of implementation in Nigeria, because the moral leadership is not there. Then to go back to the question of the president and the time, yes, without a doubt, it's a little too late. But like we've said, it's important that you bring this issue up, because if you try to do a census now in Nigeria, everybody is going to scream bloody murder, because they feel that you're going to use the election result, the census results to try to influence the elections next year. So the issue of census I think before an election, it's very volatile mix, and it cannot happen. But yes, the issues, they've recognized those issues, they've brought it up. So it's now a game where we talk about policy flip-flops, consistency in government. I've always believed that government is a continuum. But unfortunately in Nigeria, we personalize government. Buhari government, Jonathan this one, Obasanjo that one, Yar'Adua that one, Babangida this. It's a problem in Nigeria. We're not interested in that. We're interested in consistent policies that can move Nigeria forward. So irrespective of who the president is, you need to maintain roads, you need to maintain infrastructure, and you need to build on it. So I keep telling people, Jonathan did a rail line from Kaduna to Abuja, fine. Okay, Buhari's government has come in, they've done from Lagos to Ibadan, then fine. The next person, what is the next? There should be a plan to make sure that all these regional issues are done. So who's going to do the line from Port Harcourt to Makurdi? These are the things that we need to look at to know that we have a long-term plan, that irrespective of who the government is, that continuity is there. So now they brought this issue up on population control. The next administration can come in and it might not be a priority for them. So therein lies the problem. That is why it's important also that these policies should be backed up with legislation. As you've talked about what they did in India, you talked about the population bill of India in 2019. So it's important that we put this sort of policies into law so that it can be sustainable over time.
Well, given all of this, we both agree that yes, the principle is okay, but there are practical difficulties implementing a population policy in Nigeria. Are you still optimistic that at any time at all, whether in the life of this administration or in any future administration, it will be possible to control population in Nigeria?
Yes, it is possible to control population. It's about policy, political will, and that is what it's all about. It's about policies. It's possible to do many things. We're not the first country to do it. We're not reinventing the wheel, like I've said. We can take examples from China, from India, from Japan, from the United States, from countries in Europe, to see what they've done. Even Canada, that also has a problem of they don't have enough people, and how they manage bringing in people into their country to be able to maintain the levels of their population. So they have planning, and they understand that, look, we have a shortfall considering the resources we have in this country. So look at what's happening in Britain. After Brexit, they realized they have a shortfall in medical personnel. All of a sudden, Nigerians have now been welcomed into England that have skills in the healthcare services because there's a shortfall there. So it's not only important that we plan, but I think we understand that we move ourselves from these Western conspiracy issues and we begin to focus on the reality of our environment. These numbers are real. When we talk about GDP, we talk about economic analysis, sometimes they ask you, what are you talking about? It's about reality. You cannot be spending more than you earn. If you are earning 10,000 naira and you are supposed to cope with something of 20,000 naira, you're going to have a shortfall. And it is the reality of our low GDP growth, low economic growth is dawning on us now with 100 million Nigerians in poverty. It's a very simple economic analysis.
Well, on that note, we need to take a short break. If you want to be part of this conversation, you can call us on 0700-1051-1051 and also leave comment on our WhatsApp number 09099164403 and on our social media accounts at City1051 on Zoom and Facebook. We'll take that short break. Our guest is still Tilewa Adebajo. We'll be right back.
City Talks with Reuben Abati.
Welcome back to City Talks with Reuben Abati here at City 1051 FM. And our guest is still Tilewa Adebajo, the CEO of CFG Advisory Group. And we've been discussing population and sustainable development. And how would Nigeria control this rapidly growing population, whereas we don't have the infrastructure, we don't seem to have the facilities, and population is growing at a much faster rate than GDP, and of course with implications for how Nigeria manages that population. If you want to be part of this conversation, please, you can call us on 0700-1051-1051 or on WhatsApp 09099164403, and we can also be reached at City 1051 on Zoom and Facebook. Looks like we have a first caller on the line. Please, your name, your location, and then your comment or question for our guest.
Yeah, AB from Songo. Dr. Reuben Abati.
Yes, good afternoon. I know that name.
I think my take on this afternoon is, I remember in those days when we far back cities and the population, when we have a population group then, it was to have advantage. But now that the situation is like this, I think it calls for persuasion, not laws. Because if you put laws, even in the Christian sector, you now begin to tell them, we have a good health sector. And now you are telling the guests there telling us that if you only send you to private university, are they not going to pay for the private university? Is it free? So all the things work on the government. Even the China we are talking about, China is having more population, but they created an enabling environment. Many of the people that are there, 12 years, 13 years, they are learning trade. They are learning artisans. They are doing a lot of jobs there. You see some of them creative. But here in Nigeria, it's not like that. So I think the government needs persuasion, not law. They put laws in place. How many people will obey it? Because they themselves are having more children than even the ones we are talking about today. I mean, the low income group. They need to do something about that. That's my solution. Thank you.
Okay. Tilewa Adebajo, do you want to respond to that? He thinks that persuasion is the only option that government can adopt, and not to make any law, because nobody will obey that law, since the government is not even doing anything or enough for the people.
No, like I said earlier, I think he's quite right. Those things will be difficult to enforce, because even a lot of laws we have we can't enforce. But one of the things I was just thinking while he was giving that this thing is that, yes, talk about the universities. How many, with the level of youth we have now, we know that there is a number of universities that we have, and they are inadequate. So basically, we can't get enough people into universities, and I think the point is made is the fact that the outflow of that, what sort of technical training are we giving them, either as technology, coding, in the digital space, to be able to give these people, even work in artisans, being, mechanics, aeronautical mechanics. There are many things, electrical mechanics, that you can learn to be able to earn a good living. And I think what is also important, like I said, is take a look at the airport in Lagos. That airport was opened when I was in secondary school. Today, you can see it's grossly inadequate. And that is the sort of thing we are doing to Nigeria and ourselves. And you see, that airport is a big mess. It shows you that we are not planning and we're not expanding.
We have another caller on the line. Please, your name, your location, and please keep it brief. Hello? Okay, looks like we lost that particular caller. Hello? Well, while we're waiting for another caller, I wanted to bring up this issue. In Nigeria, ethnicity is a very sensitive subject. Okay? Hello?
Hello?
Yes, okay. Your name, your location.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Who is on the line?
Moses from the Color.
Okay,
And I
please
get to know as well. Look, there is a realm of idealism and realism. It will never, I saw that never, a capital NEVER in Nigeria in 1,000 years. Places where such politics ever work, mostly the demography determines a lot. Majorly they were homogeneous societies. At least, if not entirely, but largely homogeneous. Nigeria is too heterogeneous. Lots of women will be ready to it. In Nigeria, it's almost like a 50-50 between Christian and Muslims. And we have diverse views when it comes to bearing of children. That's one. Two also, anything that has to do with population control is always same with great one. I remember when Hitler tried to introduce eugenics, lobotomy during his reign. It was seen as though he wanted to clear one race, to make one race exist because he said they were superior. And on and on. He made something like Nigeria. You read the point, you never read the point. Morally, many of them are not sick at all. A man that has 8 wives, 30 children, will not tell me not to have 4 children. Or legally, are these not the policymakers that will make it laws? They will never sign to it. At best, we can discuss it here. But will it ever happen in the country? I doubt it in 1,000 years. As I said, China, India, the Chinese examples where this trade works, they are largely, if not entirely, homogeneous. Ours is too diverse. There will be so many meanings that they, in fact, if they introduce that they do, it will not pass the first reading. So we can as well discuss it, but it will never happen in Nigeria. Thank you.
Well, Tilewa, you heard him. He says Nigeria is too heterogeneous for any such policy about population control to work. Do you agree with him? Because I don't think that India, for example, is homogeneous, nor is China itself homogeneous. But he asked you the question. Over to you.
Well, yes, I think, again, what you talked about is the ethnic factor in Nigeria and the suspicious nature of our society, that this might be a conspiracy of a ruling group or a non-ruling group to suppress one population over the other one. And we have so much suspicion that, okay, maybe they want to increase their own population so they can get an advantage in the ballot box. These are the suspicions and these are the challenges we have in Nigeria. So until you remove all these suspicions, until you remove all these issues around trust, ethnicity out of the equation and focus on the real economic objective, it's going to be difficult. And that is the key challenge in Nigeria. So I agree with the caller 100% in this area. He has a point. It's going to be very difficult to implement, except you have somebody who has the political will and the sense of purpose to be able to explain to people that this outcome is positive for the whole of Nigeria as a whole.
Yeah, looks like we have another caller on the line. Hello, good afternoon. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, good afternoon, Dr. Reuben Abati. Good afternoon, sir.
Yes, good afternoon. I'm good. I'm fine.
Yeah, good afternoon. I like the guest you brought. You know, he's not trying to be politically correct. He's just putting it very bluntly, and that is it. You know, a lot of professors in the government, or whether present or past, but they will never see this reality because of what they are gaining from the government. And the whole idea of government in Nigeria term is just to enrich yourself, plan less about the future, and throw the future generation into a serious time bomb like we have already had. Well, I'm not going to discuss whether it is possible or not possible, because first of all, before you can talk about possibility or not, you know that Nigeria is not one country. Nigeria is not a united country, and we need to address that issue. You remember when you brought a consultant, a woman, she speaks about or whatever, I forgot her name now. And I raised that question that day, that are you going to have population census where people can just stroll in from Niger Republic, from Mauritania easily, and nobody's going to check them. So all of this we all know. But my own question is this: with our precarious state, like the finance minister said, the last time was doing an analysis on the budget, and maybe because of our guests, so that he can shed more light. You know that we talk about 34% of our anticipated revenue to go into debt. That is debt revenue ratio. The revenue might not even be the actual now, but the anticipated one. Meaning that with the volatility of the oil, whatever, Nigeria can have less, which means that we will be paying more. Already we are paying 90 naira out of 100 naira revenue at debt. That's number one. And if you look at the recurring, the recurring expenditure, about 6.something trillion is going to be used to service interest on loan alone. This is a country that is still going to borrow more because, number one, the issue of oil subsidy has not yet been resolved. And according to the spokesman of the president, he said that what that means is that government is going to borrow. Nigeria government will never reduce their cost like other civilized government do all over the world, but to just borrow and make life more uncomfortable for the people. Do you think there's any future in this country? I know with my little economic and finance understanding that there's no bright future for Nigeria with the present state, except we do something. And part of my recommendation is that we don't need a structure where we run a federalism, can state governors going to federal government to get money to beg for whatever. Whereas you can give autonomy to regions, make their own money, and the people in their domain will hold them accountable. By that, they are going to get an transparency and accountability in the areas where people are really concerned about who governs them. That's for the economy. Number two, on the issue of population now, do you know that the number of children out of school that they have raised in the north, even in the south here, imagine what is happening everywhere now, Yahoo, whatever. It's already telling us that we are going nowhere. The Millennium Development Goal came up in the year 2000. 15 years after, they're talking about sustainable development. We have not even achieved the Millennium Development Goal. They're talking about sustainable development in the next 30 years now. So where is Nigeria going to be in the next 15 years? So if we don't do anything, all of this unity of Nigeria is negotiable. Suddenly just because that there's no country called Nigeria again. Without shooting is gone. Everybody will just go their self going to it because we have lived 62 years now. No progress. We are just progressing every day, but we don't want to tell ourselves the truth, the bitter truth. So someday, by the time the whole is no more relevant, everybody will know that Nigeria is not even viable again. People will just peacefully go their self going to because they are not compatible. And instead of us to come together and discuss our area of differences so that we can look for a better future together, we are running away from all of that. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much. But before I go back to our guest, let's take one or two comments from WhatsApp. First, this one. The gentleman says, my name is Abdul Kayode from Ajangbadi. And he says a country without proper database of its citizens should not even bother to consider population control measures. For God's sake, we don't even have a record of the numbers of people going and coming into the country through our land borders. How do you even preach to an Hausa man who has 4 wives not to produce kids? Second one, this is from a gentleman called Adeboyega Adedeji. And he says, Nigeria is a nation governed by interest, not by a constitution. These interests are the ones behind all the policies that are affecting the nation. China was able to achieve what they have been able to achieve because the country chooses to agree and put the country first. Do we have such leaders in Nigeria? Capital no. Recently, a senator from the north brought his children, more than 18, and wives to the house, and he was boasting of having more children. Will such a senator agree to what our guest is saying? Adeboyega Adedeji. Well, let me pause there for now to allow our guest Tilewa Adebajo to respond to some of these comments. Tile, over to you.
Well, I think we've hit on all these issues, and and as you can see, the feedback we're getting from is reflecting the skeptical attitude of Nigerians to government, and to be able to talk about having the necessary to follow through. The ethnic biases have also come out through as to what they're saying, and in terms of the practicality of getting this done in Nigeria. So our callers have identified, has given us the reality of the feedback of what we're talking about. And I think that these are the things that we need to overcome. And like I said, the challenge for any of the leadership in this country is to be able to let people know that this is for the good of this country. And however we're going to do it, to be able to overcome the religious barriers, the cultural barriers, and even the personal barriers. Not to talk about the resistance you might get from the women's groups, who might think that you are trying to exploit women unnecessarily. So there's a lot of interest groups that might look at this differently. So it's important that we carry everybody along. And like somebody said, I think the call I agree with is the fact that you cannot manage what you cannot measure. So if we cannot measure our population, it's impossible for us to manage it. So without a doubt, the first step towards population control, I think I agree with that crawler, is the fact that we need to put in place a credible census for Nigeria. Then we can now talk about how we can manage it. Because when we have the population and a census, we have the data, then we understand the demographics properly, then it's important to now put in a plan. Because as I said, the plan that might work in the north would definitely not work in the southwest, because there are divergent political, religious, and cultural beliefs. So the strategy for one part of the country would definitely be different from another part of the country. So it's important that you get get those numbers right. And like you said, what you cannot measure, you cannot manage.
Looks like we have another caller on the line. Okay, please, your name, your location, and then
Good afternoon, Dr. Reuben.
Good afternoon.
Comrade Ogbanago Mohammed Ibrahim calling from Yokoba, Agege. Good afternoon, our guest.
Yes, he's hearing you. Please go ahead.
The Nigerian government or Nigeria will lack that capacity or moral right to do anything about our population. And one thing is this: in a country where just one person will be taking 100, 50, 20, 10 million naira from the government offer in the name of a government appointee or an elective officer, and you will now come and tell me you want to control a population, how I should give birth to my children, that you are not feeding them. It's moral. For you to control such, to bring that population control, then you should be able to give back to the society, protect your citizens, protect the lives and property of your citizens, create jobs, a whole lot of job opportunity. What is our population in Nigeria? As the Akuta Steel Company is there dying, you know thousands or millions of Nigerians that would have been working there if they are put it to use, and you are telling us about population control. They should go and sit down until they are ready to do the right thing. Nobody, no government officials can tell us about any population control. And finally, for those who are clamoring for census, it is for them to just make their money. They just want to initiate that to say, okay, we are going to do this and see a match the word that is not there. We are not going to take it. Good afternoon.
Well, Tilewa, just before I come to you, at this point, maybe if I may play the devil's advocate. I mean, our guest has already made a very strong point about the implications for economic growth and the deficit in terms of infrastructure, and all of us will be affected if we don't control population. But the other side of it, as was experienced in China, is that, look, this would be a women empowerment, measure, women's capacity in terms of reproductive health, because in many parts of, Nigeria, women, once they are married, due to culture, there's no limit, with implications for health. And then also the issue of adolescent sexuality and also, early marriage. Maybe, we can look at a positive side of the coin that, either legislation or policy will most likely consider. But in any case, I understand how people feel. We seem to have another caller on the line. Yes, please go ahead.
Hello, good afternoon, Dr. Reuben Abati.
Good afternoon.
Yeah, good afternoon. And Barrister Tilewa Adebajo, if I get it right.
Yes, that's our guest. Yes, please go ahead.
Yeah, hopefully me. Yeah, a quick one. See, this country is, let me just say, a country, Nigeria, is of a different religion and different ethnicity and different interest. Thank God, Doctor, you have been there. You have been the apex chamber of Nigeria before. You understand more better the angle I'm coming from and the parameter a quick one that I just want to establish. You see, in a situation whereby you have 6 different geopolitical zones in Nigeria, and some are bringing idea of being progressive, and some are bringing the idea of ethnicity interest before any other thing. Where's going to be the result? Population will enable us to have data, and for a good population sensor, we should be able to know ourselves before you can collect any data or get any data that, okay, these are farmers, these are the numbers of Navy and Nigerian soldiers we have, these are the numbers of lawyers, accountants, and what have you, all professionals and students of age between so. That that can only work if we all of us have common interest, and with the look of things, I think they are now beginning to understand where the other group, I mean the southern part, has been in the platform of the southern part. So let me just open up. The interest of the southern part is different totally from the northern part. Until when we have a common goal and common interest before this nation can move forward. That's my submission this afternoon. My name is Biodun Badmos.
Okay.
Good afternoon.
Thank you very much, Biodun Badmos. I'm sure our guests listen to you throughout. But before I go back to our guest, this is also a comment on WhatsApp. The gentleman says, "Good afternoon, Dr. Abati and the guest. The policy is a good one and it will benefit us in the long run. We are even suffering from population liability in the area of banditry, terrorism, fraud, and so on at the moment. But I'm afraid the bad policy of government, our diversity, illiteracy, tradition, religion, will be a barrier to this plan. And our government, to get the population control managed by any means or else doomsday, is imminent." Well, I see there's another caller on the line. If you could just, go ahead briefly, and then I'll go back to our guest. Hello?
Hello.
Yes, good afternoon.
Hello.
Yes. Yes, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, sir. I won't take much of the time because I could see that a lot of issues have been related here, so I won't make much of the time on this issue. As good as this policy is, who are the implementers? Who are the implementers? We are talking about women reproductive health. What is the government doing about it? Even when some people took it upon themselves to do the right thing about their reproductive health, our police are tormenting them. I read on Punch newspaper today that in Abeokuta, Ogun State Command, they have to arrest and detain a lady from Moshood Abiola Polytechnic for buying a post pill and contraceptive. Just for somebody that is enlightened, she knows that she needs to take over reproductive health. Look at what police is doing. So all these things are just a game. Okay, when they bring up a population program, how much will be voted in it? How much will be voted in it? At the end of the day, we'll just hear that some people, due to their religious belief and their culture, they didn't allow their women and their children to come out. And somebody will stretch his or her leg, and somebody will be counting, and will admit that we have done the census. So all these things, as people have said, let the government, first of all, tackle the unemployment issue, enlighten us properly on why we need to do one thing or the other. But jumping from one program to the other, we know what they mean. It's just a means to bring up a program and perform money. Good afternoon, sir.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Now, let me come to you, Tilewa Adebajo. You talked about skepticism, and we've received a very, large dose of that this afternoon. But over to you on some of the points that our callers have raised. Yes.
Reuben, I think this is the beauty of doing a very interactive program with the general public. You saw that, there was one person that was just about to even agree, but then when they agree, then there's pushback. There was not one single caller or not even one single WhatsApp message was fully in support. They might say, okay, while it might be a good idea, they qualify it. That was 2 people have qualified, but push back all the way. So you can begin to see that while there is something that is positive for the economy of the country, we have a population, we have an electorate, we have people that are skeptical, suspicious on ethnic lines, on religious grounds, about the ability or capacity to implement this without manipulating it for political purposes. So that's why we've not been able to do a credible census in Nigeria. And I think that this has some very historical connotations. And when some people are saying that there are more people in one part of the country than another, and so consequently, even to the way the seats are allocated currently in the House of Assembly, a lot of people are not happy with it. So if you start population, you're going to go into issues of restructuring. So the discussion goes very quickly onto politics, not economics. And from politics, it goes into women's health, women's reproductive health issues, and it becomes completely politicized. So while we have an issue, I think that it's good that we've heard the feedback. Most people have pushed back on this. So, and I think it's clear that, anybody who wants to do a census in Nigeria cannot do it before an election, because I think it's going to cause a lot of problems. So there we are, Dr. Abati, the dilemma of Nigeria.
True, very true. Nigeria's big dilemma. On that note, I would like to thank you very much, Tilewa Adebajo, for joining us today to discuss population and sustainable development. And I'd like to thank also all those who called in and those who reach out to us on Zoom and Facebook. Remember, the conversation does not end here. You can still reach out to me on my social media account at Abati1990 on Instagram, and also at City1051 on all social media platforms. For those of you who tuned in late, there's no need to worry. You can visit our YouTube page, City1051, to watch the entire show shortly. And don't forget to hit the subscribe button and leave comments. Don't forget also to tune in next week at 12 noon for another exciting edition of City Talks. My name is Reuben Abati. The show was produced by Adedoja Allen, Charles Flames, Abiodun Odunton, Ayodamola Oludara, and Oluwaseun Adetitun. Thank you very much for joining us today. Have a great weekend. We'll see you again next week. Thank you.
City Talks with Reuben Abati.